what happens in those moments too is that their ego wants to win the situation. Often debate is so performative. It's not even, there's sometimes it's not even deeply held convictions, but yet the attention that they get from having the debate, and the social conditioning of just wanting to win in those moments. So
in a world that often pulls us apart, More in Common brings us back to what matters. Hosted by Gerren Taylor and Keith Richardson, this isn't your average podcast. It's a challenge to think deeper, question louder, and grow further. At More in Common, we work with NFL teams, tech companies, and professionals across industries to improve communication and foster compassion. And with a focus on emotional intelligence, we aim to bring a wealth of experience to help you navigate the complexities of human connection. We've never been more connected and yet more isolated. We want to explore the roots of that tension and offer a way back to what we all need: real human connection. Enjoy the show.
what if I was playing like the Tijuana Taxi?
Is that what they call it? The Tijuana Taxi?
It's actually a song. It's a real song named by Herbert Alpert and the Tijuana Brass.
Well, since you live in Tijuana, I wasn't sure if it was like some slang that was used about taxis.
You know what? It could be. I'm joking. No,
I mean, I don't know why that's the only other alternative. The binary there. It's like, it's either a song that was created by a band or it is slang used in Tijuana. But that is the option that came to my mind.
That's you're either oring already after last episode. This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's still Keith Richardson.
Still haven't changed.
We're still talking about logical fallacies. Are you sure you're not going to change?
My camera coloring might have me going from red to green to white as you're watching this on video, but if you're not I'm YouTube, still Keith.
You're missing out. By the way, follow, share the show, leave a comment, go give us some more engagement, because you know what? We like what the trending is. And I think if you're liking this, then the people will like this. And, think about it. That's what I'm saying.
Just think about it. I know it's sometimes it's a hard effort, right? It's where nobody's sitting in the middle of this world that we all live in, trying to put out the good that we think is necessary in the world. And hey, if you like it, maybe someone else in your ecosystem will like it.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you for doing it.
That's exactly why we do it too, so that we can, have better discussions with everybody. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's right.
I try to get it out there.
Yeah, it's one of those adverse consequences of this whole thing is that every time I listen back to our episodes, I'm like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I should do that. It's a good reminder to self too. But anyway, back to you, Gerren.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe even a couple of haters. You know what I mean? I'll take it at this point. It's fine. Whatever.
No press is bad.
I don't know.
Right?
I'm just over here sipping water. Imagine hating me. Come on. Let's be honest.
I want you to imagine your mind.
Just over here trying to stay hydrated and then hating on me.
All right. What do we got for this week?
Well, the reason why I brought up haters is because often what you see on it is the logical fallacy known as a strawman argument. And we chose to do either or first last week. If you haven't listened, go back. It's available to you. But we chose to do this one afterward because they're kind of connected in some ways. Often a false dichotomy argument is based upon a straw man response. And again, this goes back to me as a former debater, collegiate debater, and all that jazz. You see it so often formed in argumentation that it was one of the things that we were often taught to call out and taught to identify, because it is one of the simpler forms of argumentation, right? People often try to We'll roadmap it here. We'll define it, and then we'll talk about how it exists, and then we'll talk about how to try to fight it. Uh, but it often extrapolates in an argument a bunch of things that aren't even there, like oftentimes non sequiturs. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'll go to let's throw it to Keith for the official definition.
So going back to, the whole importance that we see in talking about logical fallacies. I mean, we're all about navigating human connection, right? And these things often get in the way. And we talked a lot about that last week with the straw man, and or not the straw man, the either or the binary argument. It is very, as Gerren just put it, tied to the straw man, but it's a little bit different in how it manifests. It's not someone making an argument that says this or that. It's someone that's taking someone else's argument and substituting it with weaker or exaggerated version of that argument that can easily be criticized. So even talking about the example that you used last week with defund the police, it's saying, oh, so you want to defund the police, oh, so you think police shouldn't exist at all and that we should get rid of it all entirely, and it takes the potential worst possible outcome of that argument and then just tears it apart and then attributes that other person to that argument, and then it basically is an attempt to disqualify the
Yeah,
argument in of itself.
it's a building a fake version of their argument just so you can knock it down. Exactly that. And it often I see this sometimes in even vegetarianism, veganism, this versus culture, you know what I mean? So if you are a meat eater, then you're all the meat eaters are evil, and it's not, again, returning to the point of nuance, right? Are this binary understanding of the world tries to help us in our brains and our simple versions of our brains, but what we don't often deal with is the levels of nuance that must exist for the world that we have today.
Yeah, and this is, this one's a little bit harder to navigate because basically someone else is taking your words and spinning them, right? And they're not taking an opportunity to engage you, and that can be challenging because we're really talking about how to engage other people, right? Like take some really um basic ones, culturally, the movement to say happy holidays, right? And what that becomes to somebody else is that I'm suddenly anti-Christmas. When the reality is, for most of us, not all of us, right? And I think part of the reason the straw man exists is because you get a avatar or an example of an extreme representation of the happy holidays, and then you project it onto everybody else. I know for me, I say happy holidays because I don't know what you celebrate,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't know that there are two reasons, quite frankly. I say happy holidays is one, I don't know what you celebrate. I don't know if you celebrate any other holiday, though most of the holidays around Christmas that are not Christmas aren't as popular a holiday in those religions. So it's kind of an interesting element, but at the end of the day, you want to be respectful to a person you don't know. It doesn't mean I'm anti-Christmas. Hell, I'll get my Christmas tree. I got all our our Christmas decorations. We do the whole thing. We do Santa. We do all of that. If you're a Christmas person, I will say Merry Christmas. But so it's hard if I say happy holidays and that person comes back to you and attacks you and says, oh, so you don't like Christmas, right? That is a straw man argument.
I mean, for me, and I think this also comes back down to how we experience the world. I did have the experience of growing up around Jewish people and playing with a dreidel, and knowing African Americans who were like deep into the culture and celebrated Kwanzaa instead of Christmas, And so it is important, I think, to be inclusive as something that I value. But there are people who
Yeah.
don't value that. And I think that what happens in those moments too is that their ego wants to win the situation. Often debate is so performative. It's not even, there's sometimes it's not even deeply held convictions, but yet the attention that they get from having the debate, and the social conditioning of just wanting to win in those moments. So, but if we remember that when we are always defending our position, we're not listening, we're not trying to make a better conversation, then hopefully we can, you know, pull back a little bit from that.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side of that, because I love the way you phrased it. We often, w- if someone comes and adamantly says "Merry Christmas," we might say, "Oh, you don't care about other people's religions, right?" And I don't know you. I don't know the emotional thing that you have going on. But when we do these straw man arguments in our minds and in our emotional experience, it actually has real world impact. Um, and it's not just in online discourse or the downstream effects. Like, this happens a lot in social movements,
Yeah.
regardless of the social movement where you have infighting. I will share a story. I will be very vague about this because I want to be sensitive to this person. They haven't given me like permission to give specifics, but they represent a nonprofit that supports groups in a particular underserved segment of our society. Well, this is a multi-billion-dollar nonprofit, and access to that type of ecosystem comes with some things that aren't always comfortable for this person. The politics of it, the belief that the community they're serving may not need that money, right? Like, there are all kinds of things for them to navigate, and they have to play that politics in order to ensure that those communities they're serving are getting the opportunity to grow. And what we know is you can't change a system from outside the system. And sometimes you have to uncomfortably work within the system that
Yeah.
exists in order to make incremental change over time. But the community that they're serving, when they find these things out, they vilify this human being. Oh, you don't really care about us. Oh,
Right.
you don't really want to make change. Oh, you're just another sellout, right? All of those are straw man arguments that take the most vulnerable point of their position in an idealistic ecosystem and just rips them down to the lowest common denominator, when at the end of the day they have the position to both change the system and support these ecosystems. And rather than being supported
Right.
and empathized with for the difficulty that this gives them, they are easily ripped down. So they have to find a way to navigate both so that doesn't occur. And these are the real worlds. We all do this. We do this in relationships,
Yeah.
right? It's like
I was gonna say
kids
personal
do this.
relationships happens a lot. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
personal experience with an ex that was like that. That was very much if we had a disagreement. Oh, so you're saying I'll never be good enough for you? Like, whoa, that's that's the straw man, right? That's the not what I'm saying. You're taking this to an extreme that is not what I said.
And oftentimes these straw mans are just a reflection of emotional challenges that we have that we don't know how to navigate. And it goes back to our childhood. Children do this shit all the time, right? Like, no, you can't have that second cupcake because you haven't had dinner yet. Oh, why? You don't love me anymore?
All right.
And to us as adults, we think that's the most irrational, illogical thing. And because it is, because a child doesn't have the executive functioning to really understand the nuance of that. But rather than explore that sentiment with a child, we punish them. We frustrate, we yell at them, we get angry. Don't say that. That's not true. And we carry that as we get older, as ways of maybe getting what we want, because my parent gave me the extra cupcake when I told them that they don't love me anymore. And we learn these things at early ages, and we don't necessarily get all of the support structure to navigate. We talk about our emotional experience a lot. Strawmans are an emotional experience.
Absolutely.
It's an
Absolutely.
expression of our frustration towards a position that we just don't get.
I think that people don't often recognize that sometimes they're in these conversations and they're reacting to something that sounds extreme, or like the extreme version of what was said, but not what was actually said, or not noticing that they're giving an emotional reaction before clarifying the meaning to what was said. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead and asking, okay, what do you mean by that exactly? Right? Like, somebody asked me the other day, or told me the other day, that something I had posted was a weak argument. And instead of being like, well, that's stupid, it's a great argument for what I said, how do you mean?
What makes, yeah.
Yeah. How do you mean that? What makes it a weak argument? Didn't get a
What was their
response.
response to that? Of
Didn't get
course
a
not. It's
response.
online.
Yeah.
Online doesn't get responses.
Right.
It's always funny when you're in online spaces and
Although it
you
is
break
someone I
through the
know in real
irrational.
life. It's not like an
Yeah,
online random, but still,
and it doesn't matter, right? Like,
it doesn't.
when you got that space and you don't have to confront it, you can just let it go. I'm not going to answer. I see it all the time when you bring in real logic, like that connects dots. That's all I'm talking about when I talk about logic. I'm not talking about some advanced form of thinking. I'm just connecting dots to points made in discussion. You frequently don't get responses. It kind
Sure.
of just stops.
I hope that
But
it
in
means that
person,
they're thinking about it and being
yeah,
curious and taking away
you would
from
hope
it.
so.
That's
You would hope
that's
so.
it. That's my optimism showing through there.
You would hope so. Either that or they think you're an idiot and they're just like, I'm not engaging in this person anymore. But in person, you can't do that, right? I mean, unless combat ensues. Um, and it's one of those areas that can be really difficult. But to your point, like, not getting so, like, understanding the offense that you take to a particular position that's stated. We talk about this all the time. We talked about it last week, the suitcase terms, right? Recognizing that it's like, okay, they said some words and I am associating my meaning to those words, the joy of language and all of our subcultures around language. In some subcultures, it's okay to say, "Hey, what's up, bitch?" Right? And they're like, "Yeah, cool." But if you bring that outside of that culture to somebody else, they'd be like, whoa, 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 don't call me that.
Wow.
Right. And it's like, yeah,
Who you
that's tough.
calling a bitch?
Or yeah. Or you take like the UK, they use cunt like it's fuck in the US. But boy, in the US, it has a whole different meaning.
Well, now that we run down that path, I want to bring us back to how we uh how we identify and avoid following this. For instance, I think there is a connection that we should highlight between emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and straw men, right? Because straw men often happen when you're the person making a straw man argument towards someone. It often happens when you feel unsafe or unseen. And that lack of self-awareness in those moments is when your emotional ego defense mechanism takes over, and you're being more defensive than you are trying to understand. And it's often, like I said, it's not just the desire to win, which often happens, but it is sometimes as a I don't feel safe type of response.
And think about this, taking it a step further as you reflect as a listener when you do this. What is, you're in a situation where someone says something and you bite back, right? whatever side of an argument you're on, we all do this. There's no, oh, the right does this, the left does this. Like, let's get out of those either or and binary situations. Is that people do this, so we do it too. There is this reflection to think back, what's the next thing that you often do when that other person that you just created a straw man for is you walk away and you seek validation. You go and tell your friends, oh, can you believe this happened? Oh, let me tell you a story. To your point, G, you're seeking that safety, that comfort, that space that says, not that I am right intellectually, but that I am right as a person. That I have my community that validates my existence, because if I can't find that, I'm alone. I'm lonely. And there's tension, and that emotional awareness, we talk about it so much, just becomes really, really hard to navigate it, right? Which really leads to like some very practical things. But I have some thoughts, but I am eagerly awaiting to ask you this question. Is that, in you mentioned it at the beginning, in debate you were taught to suss it out and challenge it. So what did that look like? Like, what were the tips and tricks that were part of the debate forum that you project out and can use in regular discourse?
Well, I think part of it is really listening. You know, uh, often when you're responding to someone making a straw man argument about something that you said, it is about them misconnecting or taking an extreme version of what you said, and so clarifying that part of it in a debate format is a little different than in conversation, just because when you're going back and forth in a debate, that's timed, right? So, like, you're not, there's very limited cross-examination period where you're both talking directly back and forth to each other, whereas when you're talking in person with someone, it's almost all cross-examination. I ask you something, you ask me something, back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so what we try to do to avoid it is, again, you really pause, really think about what you heard. um, there are logical endpoints you can take certain arguments, but the point is not to embellish things that are not logical outcomes from them. And the other thing that I think about when listening for a straw man, uh, is, I mean, you know what you said for the most part, right? But when you get a canned kind of boiled down response, like you're saying, like the most simplest form of the counter argument, especially when taken to extremes, it's often what we know is occurring. And one of the ways that I try to avoid making them myself in interpersonal conversations, especially, is not only to listen, but to listen for the intent. So, like, try to understand what they're actually trying to convey, even if they don't have all the words. But that requires slowing down and then repeating back to the person what I understood them say. This was also a tool that we used in conflict management, and that was elementary school. So you're right. I have been doing all
yeah,
this stuff for a long time. But that was one of the ground rules that we would teach each other in these conflict mediation sessions, is to repeat back to the person what you heard them say happened, or what they were hurt or offended by, so that you gain clarity when trying to create the resolution. And clarity, right? Curiosity, as we always say, seeking clarity, not being in a rush to make a decision about a certain thing, is how you don't react emotionally in the moment. Trying to hit those trigger points returns you to your logic, as opposed to just reacting emotionally. And it does take practice. It's not something you can, just jump and do tomorrow, but it does allow for much deeper understanding, when you're trying to do that,
yeah.
especially in your interpersonal.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you drew out and all of that is you mentioned the end point. And I love that you use a steel man to address a straw man, right? The repeating back of the words that were said to you. Um, but the end point, a straw man tends to be an end point, a conclusion to an initial statement, right? It is jumping all the way over any conversation that could happen to come to the conclusion that you understand based on other experiences, and it's actually taking away your opportunity to engage in a dialogue that may actually be really hard to do, but it's still taking away your opportunity because you jump to the conclusion. So if someone is just adding to it, not to overstate all of the things that can be done, but asking a question. This goes back to last week, like, be curious. Going back to Katie, be curious, be curious, be curious. Is that really the conclusion that we are going to come to in this conversation? Because that a straw man is, in essence, an attempt to conclude the discussion.
Yeah,
And
it is.
the question, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it comes back down to trying to win or not, or trying to understand, right? If we really are trying to engage with curiosity instead of just trying to live in outrage, bullet points, I won, I smashed that lib type culture, then what you do is you allow for time, nuance, and discussion to open up. And being curious, being humble, you know, uh, I'm gonna modify what I said in the previous episode, right? Where it was conflict is inevitable, combat is optional, but conflict is inevitable still, but misunderstanding is optional. You can seek clarity.
Ooh.
You can ask
Ooh.
questions and be curious and really understand where someone is coming from. Because avoiding strawman isn't about disagreeing or agreeing with someone. It's about actually getting to the truth of what's being said, as opposed to just hyper hyperbolized versions of arguments.
Yeah, man. Oh, I love that. Conflict is inevitable, but misunderstanding is optional. Um, it is, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this conversation for me right now is the through line to everything that we've talked about in all our episodes, right? Like, we talk about curiosity from a more philosophy standpoint. We talk about it with Katie. We talk often about asking questions to seek clarity. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't go to the end. We look at all of these things to recognize, but what's interesting is at the end of them, the solutions are still fairly consistent. The human experience is, unfortunately, a fairly simple thing. And maximizing the positive outcomes that we can get from it by improving and enhancing our connections and our communities and how we engage and work with others often comes from just exploring possibilities, not from jumping to the end and saying, I'm done. And a straw man does that really well. And a great way to do it without navigating combat is by saying, oh, that's an interesting conclusion you just drew from what I said. Can we explore that a little bit further?
And
Be-
again, the reason why we do this and the reason why we think these having these discussions is important is what else are we doing? Do we really want to keep going down this road where everyone's fighting constantly and we're not trying to help each other and our Congress does nothing and nothing ever gets better? Like, that doesn't sound like the right way to go about things. I hope for a better outcome.
Look, I mean, goodness, the economics of the echo chamber. Go back, listen to that episode. Like, we have been marketed for centuries now to think certain things, and they ingrain in our culture, and then we believe them. And then, because at the end of the day, we're trying to be simple. We're trying to maintain what is the goal. I know for me, it's living a happy, healthy, fruitful, long-term life that is able to take advantage of the systems that are in place, because I can't change shared currency. Like, I can't just be a pioneer and rip it all up, and that's going to be in my lifetime. But I can take part and walk away and, love thy neighbor, enjoy the interactions I have in life, and not live such a hate. Like, people in power do rely on us disliking one another and being fearful. Like, this isn't an aberration here. The only way we can not succumb to that is by not doing it and doing the little things that it takes to work through and, be amicable at best. I'm not even saying love thy neighbor, just be amicable with thy neighbor.
Start there. Yeah, let's just start it right there. How about that? This is the More in Common podcast. I'm Gerren Taylor. That's Keith Richardson. I think we should do more of these logical fallacy series. These are fun.
I agree. These are fun. And you know what? I'm gonna jump to a conclusion here and say at the end of it, it's probably gonna be ask more questions to navigate that. But I think this is
share,
great.
Leave us a comment, do the things that help grow the show. We appreciate it. We appreciate you for being here every week as we discuss these things. Anything else, Keith?
No, that's it.
That's it. All right, we're out. See you next week, y'all. Have fun.
See ya.